Hello and welcome to Red Shirt Cinema Club, a weekly podcast about fandom and watching things with friends. This week, our time in Middle-earth comes to an end, but before we set sail for the Grey Havens, we've one more film to watch and dissect. The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies. I have never seen this. Nath saw it 10 years ago and hated it. But is there an undiscovered light in the darkness? Can the Hobbit trilogy win a place in our hearts after all these years? Listen on to find out. Hello and welcome to Red Shirt Cinema Club. I am your host, Kung Fu Phantom of Angmar, Rob Pearson, joined today by pig-riding CGI dwarf lord Nathan Dighton.
Thank you very much.
And not by Dave, who has somehow managed to plan his paternity leave to coincide perfectly with these 3 Hobbit episodes. Well done, Dave.
Well done, Dave.
We've just completed Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy by watching Battle of the Five Armies, a film I was watching for the very first time. And one you were watching for the first time in how long, Nathan?
I've seen it, I think, partially once through since release. So I think this was maybe 5 years.
One thing that surprised me after watching the first 2 films was how much my opinion of them had noticeably softened.
Yeah.
Of course, I have no previous opinion of this film. So yeah. I will get onto my opinion in a minute, but I want to ask you, first of all, Nath, has your opinion of this film softened or changed at all?
It's softened. I don't know why it's softened. Even though I was watching it...
Softening.
I was watching it with you and there was one moment, which I'm sure we'll get onto, where a particular character came back for another just little bite at whatever cherry he was going for, and you just slumped. And at that point, I didn't know if you could slump anymore. It was like you were imploding.
I did have quite a bad headache whilst we were watching this film.
Yeah.
And I don't think... if you've got a headache, I wouldn't recommend this film to you.
That's fair. Not on the headache playlist.
But what? Let's just talk about that, because I don't know what his name is.
Alfred.
Yep. The master's little monobrowed, horrible teeth. Yeah. Just horrible.
We'll beep this, but afterwards I mentioned this to you. It's the only thing we said, and you said, "What the eyebrow?" That was all you said.
Monobrow.
What an awful.
Man. I don't understand. I just don't understand. I really, really try in these podcasts not to just sit here and moan and just shit on other filmmakers' choices, or, Peter Jackson is a brilliant filmmaker.
Definitely.
We know he's a brilliant filmmaker. We know it's really hard to make good things. And we've seen instances where other brilliant filmmakers, aka Ridley Scott, have made phenomenal films, and they've tried to replicate and recapture whatever magic it was that made those films brilliant, and then couldn't quite grab on to that elusive quality in trying to revisit what they'd made before. And I feel like the Hobbit trilogy, to a large extent, is often trying to recapture that elusive magic of the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, it can't quite do it. What I don't understand is just what the heck is going on with this character? All I've ever done is love the Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson. Why are you doing this to us? What's he doing?
I find it confounding as well.
It's inexplicable.
Everyone makes mistakes. That's the only thing. Obviously, Peter Jackson or his team think that this is funny. That's the I think that's all of it. That's the only.
I can understand one person, maybe Peter Jackson. Maybe that's the problem. He's too powerful. He thinks it's funny. Surely everyone else is watching this, being like, "What?" Even if I was the actor playing Alfred, I'd be like, "Peter,
it's
my dream to be in a Middle-earth movie directed by you, but Jesus Christ."
Well, I was thinking about obviously there's a tone difference, but then there's a tone difference between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings anyway.
Yeah.
And you think about a character like this, like Grima, who existed in Lord of the Rings, and how he's treated. There is a little bit of comedy. I told you to take away the staff, or whatever it was. And this, he's so cartoonishly bad.
Yeah.
In a way which I can only assume is Jackson and his team trying to play up on the kind of the younger skewing nature of The Hobbit.
Yeah.
It's slightly more for kids. There's very little to enjoy. It scrapes along. It's awful. He keeps on doing the worst thing that he can.
He really does.
He makes me feel sick, and I know he's supposed to make me feel sick.
Yeah.
It's like there's just a little bit of Meet the Feebles, which has made its way into the Hobbit film.
I've never seen Meet the Feebles.
It's just like
and maybe I never will.
Grotesque humour that isn't funny. Like,
yeah, it's really strange, and it doesn't belong here. And it pisses me off that he gets screen time with everyone. He even gets a scene with Gandalf, for Christ's sake.
it's poor.
I thought Gandalf was going to tell him to, in wizard talk, keep your forked tongue behind your teeth or whatever. I've not
Smack him with his
not
staff.
travelled across half of Middle Earth to bandy creed words with a witless worm. But no, he's there and he's like, make sure Bilbo doesn't escape.
It's the weird. I'd say even if it was just, it's not just that it's not funny. It's the tone jumps. There's that moment where the people of Lake Town are going to lynch him, kill him.
Yeah,
which is really dark. And Bard has to say, no, we're not killing anyone again now for the moment. Even though if we had to kill anyone, this would be a really good choice. And that's, I don't know what that moment's for. It doesn't really make me feel, I wanted him to be killed because I hate him. So I don't know. I would say that a lot of the reason that my opinion of this film has softened since the first time that I watched it, I think that it still has all the same problems that I thought it had. I've just finished actually re-listening. I've listened to Martin Shaw read The Hobbit.
Right.
So I've got to the end. And I would say that a lot of the problems that I have are in the book. There's lots of... it isn't... Ultimately, it's a story... And when I say it's a children's story, specifically I mean that I think that the massive problem with motivation that gives everyone in The Hobbit is that the treasure is just its own thing. And when you set that next to then suddenly he's written an actual fucking Bible and in the Silmarillion, and he's written this incredible 3-volume story about good triumphing over evil and the nobility of failing but trying to do the right thing and how powerful the ring is. And then you've got like dwarves, men and elves, and they're all just like, oh, I'd love some of that gold. Gold, 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 gold. And gold is like, and when it's a kid's story, it's like treasure's exciting. Let's go and get the treasure. That's cool. Yeah. Everyone wants the treasure. And then you bring that into an adult moral universe, and it doesn't make any sense anymore.
Exactly. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. That's that strange, jarring, Well, Peter Jackson is trying to... There are so many scenes in here that feel like Peter Jackson trying to emulate certain emotional beats from The Lord of the Rings and it falling completely flat. Why that is, I have not really sort of dug into it and explored. But you've got the parallel between Thorin's greed. They call it the dragon sickness. I can't remember whether it's called the dragon sickness in the book or whether Thorin even gets dragon sickness in the book.
He does go a bit weird.
But... There are parallels there between that and the evil of the ring, I guess, and the temptation and just the loss of his humanity, his soul. And parallels with that and the fall of Smeagol, I guess.
I think it's heightened in such a way, and it's even given some of the same stylistic treatment as the scenes with the ring.
Yeah. I can't remember. I'm trying to remember specifics, but there are a couple of moments where I was like, okay, even if it's just a little bit of music that comes in,
a high note,
where it's the film is telling you, okay, you remember that bit from Lord of the Rings? This is like that. There are bits during the battle where everything seemed to be going terribly. Suddenly you get bits of slow-mo. The sound would go all echoey and reverby, and it reminded me of those moments in Return of the King just before the Rohirrim arrive.
Right.
Everything is at its lowest point. But in The Hobbit, there's no real emotional stakes for the audience to latch onto. Certainly I didn't feel them. Like I just didn't really care that much at any point. It's, all spectacle but no soul. Like all action but no real drama. Like we're watching visually arresting stuff happening all the time.
Yeah.
Like from about an hour in, the film's just one big fight.
This is definitely much worse with this, I think, than the other two films, because it's the payoff, because it's a climax, because, like you say, there are armies coming in, and you can't help but remember the scenes in so well orchestrated in Helm's Deep with the arrival of different armies, or Return of the King on Pelennor Fields, like you said, with the arrival of the Rohirrim. And at the moment, the stakes have been so well managed, and the register of the entire story is told in, the stakes are the end of the world, and we've known that since the beginning. And there's like just this graph or this gradient of stakes rising. And here it's a story about there are, now I watch it for a second time all the way through. The scenes, the wider scenes, some taken from the appendices or some extrapolated from them, about Gandalf meeting Thorin and about the Arkenstone being placed there earlier. They're all an attempt to kind of let us know that this is a prequel to the event. Well, literally a prequel, like a preceding the events of Lord of the Rings. But there's some like pre-match tactical maneuvers going on for Lord of the Rings. That Sauron kind of wants to get to the mountain, and that's why he's sending orcs out there. And the dwarves having a stronghold might be bad for him, and
yes,
but it doesn't. I think maybe I think that actually there might be a version of this film where you give that team who have shown how good they are at making things in Lord of the Rings more time, and they do come up with answers that you and I wouldn't. They would level out the tone because the ingredients of lots of things that I enjoy are here. And I was actually watching the battles. I have misgivings about the amount of CG. It's so funny, right? This is a morbid one, but Billy Connolly, who I am fascinated by and love as a comedian and as just a figure, a big kind of fan of his and his career. But he had announced that he had Parkinson's right around this time, and that's why he's not really in the film.
Is that why?
In a physical way? I think so. He's still alive. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of crazy how
it's strange.
We were all. I mean, I'm not saying that was that he was pretending and that he should have been on that goat or whatever it was, but it's just that was just wild to me to think. Oh yeah, even then I was thinking, oh Billy, it's a bit sad. He's on his last legs, long last legs, I guess. But so misgivings, but basically watching it going, this is way better than I remember. But also, like you said, I'm not attached to anything in there.
No.
And it's so hard. It's basically, we spent so long talking about how fantastic this group of creatives were at putting storytelling into battle scenes. And then we have a scene where maybe they're doing the same mechanically and moment to moment with the pacing and the signposting. They're letting us know all those things, but it's just the sympathies are weird. Like, I was so put out by how Mardy Thorin was being.
Yeah,
certainly the first time I watched it, which is absolutely in the book. And then the idea that elves and dwarves would fight, I didn't like that, especially when there's like all these. It's so frustrating. Again, it's all in the book, really. So that's why I have more sympathy this time. But it's not the same as, let's get the lads together for one last holdout against the Dark Lord. Like, that's just a better story.
It is just, it's unsatisfying in many ways. And also just that weird thing of, it's so climactic. It literally is just 5 armies all turning up. They've all got like a WWE style entrance bit.
It's true.
Like the orcs when they arrive. Oh, they haven't remembered the big worms that are here, and we're gonna come through the holes they make. They're not gonna see this coming, and then we just never see the worms again. Are the worms in the
worms bad
in the Legendarium?
Not that I'm aware of.
I don't know what the worms are.
Also, maybe Azog, he's like Jeff Stelling. He's like on top of the mountain. It's like, what do they call it? It's Football Saturday or whatever the hell it is. Soccer Saturday. And he's just calling out. He's like, yeah, there he is. And we're going to go over to Borg. Borg's coming in with the worms. Oh, the worms are here, Jeff.
Borg, there's been a breach, but who's got it? It's the dwarves. It's the dwarves, Azog. Yeah. They've pierced through the ranks.
Yeah, and they'll be like, Legolas has got a shot, and so they're going over. Legolas is going to take a penalty. Oh, he's not even got an arrow in his quiver.
There's been a death. Who is it? It's Keeley. Oh no.
That was what it was like.
Yeah.
I was kind of Imagine if the Eagles had just turned up half an hour earlier.
The flipping Eagles, man.
Knocked Azog off his little perch.
The little cheat codes, aren't they, the Eagles?
Again, that is in the book.
I cannot help but admire and continue to admire, as you say, the staging, despite the fact I didn't really care about it, the weaving of the narrative into this battle of 5 armies. There are 5 armies battling, but Peter Jackson is very good Not as good here as he is in The Lord of the Rings, obviously. Very good at creating small little pockets of action.
Yeah.
With emotional attachment. A lot of it feels a bit contrived here. But I can't help but admire his skill at being able to do that. And there's so much going on. I only occasionally sort of lost track of where we were and why people were doing what they're doing. Most of the time it was fine. Like, okay, so we've got the elves, they're here, they just want some gold. Bard and the little rabble of survivors from Lake Town, they also want the share of gold that was promised. We've got Thorin with dragon sickness, probably just so he can have that heroic moment where he decides he's not ill with dragon sickness anymore.
Yeah.
And he comes out and he's like, will you fight me? Will you follow me one more time? And they're all like, yeah.
I didn't love that. Do you know, actually one of my least favourite scenes, I just didn't think it worked at all, was the abstract scene where he kind of gets lost in the gold.
So weird.
Just poor.
So weird. There had to be a better and more satisfying and more characterful way for him to have his reprieve from his
No one else
sickness.
even in the room.
Well, it's very sort of on the nose as well, where his speech has a Smaug style to it.
Well, he says us at one point.
And it's just, the film clearly saying, look, he's got dragon sickness, he's speaking like Smaug. Like in The Lord of the Rings when Frodo would say, it's mine.
Yeah.
And everyone, oh, he's speaking like Gollum.
Yeah,
the ring's taking him.
Slap him.
Yeah.
I was furious at the idea that Dane would arrive and with Billy Connolly, and then you'd be like, let us in then, lads, because we can defend this entire city, obviously, because we're dwarves, we're here, let us in. And then the orcs are all smashing them up. And it's like, the answer to that isn't 13 other dwarves come out. It's let the dwarves into the fortress.
No. The cinematic answer, the strategic battle answer is obviously let the lads in.
Yeah.
But the cinematic answer is we're coming out.
Yes.
We're going to smash through the tantrum wall that we've built earlier on.
Yes.
With a big hammer bell thing.
Well, it looked like they had... I was annoyed that they just seemed to have a giant golden dwarf cast ready to go. That was a golden dwarf. So it was obviously like, here's one we made earlier. And we can use that to smash the door down.
It's weird that the film's called The Hobbit, really, because The Hobbit, Bilbo, doesn't really have a great deal to do other than commentate on the action and occasionally decide to do something heroic.
I think this is one of the big problems of the film that the film would have needed to have gotten over, because it doesn't really deviate that much from what happens in the book. But I don't find Bilbo's actions enormously satisfying as a moral... He's sort of the moral compass, and he is kind of doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. When he's like, Norin was my friend. I'm like, was he? Like, yeah, you were on a trap, but he was horrible to you all the time. Like, I don't really buy that relationship. Like no. They had some big... I kind of welled up listening to the book and then seeing it in the film, skipping right to the end now, when he says it's much more casual in the book, but just you're welcome anytime.
Oh, that bit was great.
Tease at 4. I love that he's going back to his domesticity. Tease at 4.
That was the best bit of the whole film.
But come anytime.
By a long way.
It was great.
Because it's there, little flashes of the heart of Lord of the Rings is in those moments.
Yeah, the homeliness.
Yes, and little close-ups on James Nesbitt's crying face.
Yeah. Honestly, I think this is what makes Tolkien so difficult to adapt in a way. I think the best line maybe in the entire Hobbit is tea is at 4.
Yeah.
Because it stands for so much. The fact that there is tea, the fact that it's the same time every day, the fact that normally people might not be welcome to tea at all, let alone tea not at 4. But for you guys,
it was like the film had all of a sudden just opened a well at that point of soul, and it's like, oh look, there is stuff down here.
Yeah,
like the entire time it's been this big, quite shallow fight, lots of clashing, lots of shouting, lots of be sad that this person's dead, and you're not really that sad.
No.
You know, we've come from, I think, one of the very worst scenes. The worst scene for me in the whole trilogy was when Toriel was crying over
She said three things. She should have said one thing. She said, if this is love, I don't want it. And I was like, that is a Celine Dion music video, but I will allow it in this instance. And then she says, it really hurts loads. And then she looks up at Thranduil and says, why does it hurt or something? And he's like, because it was real.
That was so bad.
So because it was real?
Because
what kind of fucking naughty MySpace bullshit is this? My love was real.
A very clumsy callback to him earlier telling her that love wasn't real.
Yeah.
Just so unelven-like as well.
It is.
And we already, no one who likes the relationship. Write in at redshirtcinemaclub@gmail.com if you were emotionally caught up in the relationship between Toriel and Feely or Keely. Which one is it? Keely. Is it Keely?
It's Keely.
Keely.
Yeah. And we'll tell you why you're wrong.
It was awful. One of it was the genuine worst scene in the trilogy.
I didn't enjoy
but
it.
then quite soon after that, we get that. And it made me remember when Martin Freeman said, tea is at 4. And it did make me well up a bit as well. I was like, I can't believe The Hobbit is making me feel emotional.
Yeah.
Because there's been nothing here, really.
Well, that's the thing which I find there are things I like in this.
Yeah.
And especially this time. Like I said, I was more, and I feel like if I keep watching them, maybe I'll get warmer to them every time.
Yes.
I'll see the faults less and less. I liked him coming home dressed like, because he'd just been dressed the same for 3 movies.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's like he's coming back from going traveling in South America or something. Do you know what I mean? It's like wearing a cool cloak and
coming back in his level 45 gear.
He is. Well, the thing they don't show is picking up the troll gold hoard on the way back. That's where his money actually.
Oh, right.
His 14th share is gone. That is gone.
In the book as well, don't the dwarves over the years come back and visit him on many an occasion, and they bring gold with them.
Oh, really?
I think
that's fair. Well, do you know? Actually, one thing I was going to say about the adaptation of Bilbo and how hard that is, and I think that one of the things which I really dislike in the Hobbit films, I understand the choice, I dislike it, is the treatment of the ring. As I said before, I think that in throwing forward and giving us a little eye into what the ring will become, I think it undermines something about the purity of Bilbo. Bilbo has an adventure and he finds a magic ring, and when you're 10 or 11, that's just cool.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be told, and of course the ring was kind of like existential heroin. He's fucked from this point on. And that's the last shot where he's kind of like, he looks at it and he kind of looks away, and he does it's like an addict finding a fucking bag of pure heroin in his pocket. Do you know what I mean? He's like, I know I'm wrong. It's like this suddenly pulled into this world of vice with Bilbo. And that is not the end of The Hobbit. The end of The Hobbit is he goes home and he's happy and he's got a bunch of gold.
And he's rich.
And he's got a magic ring.
I didn't find it too bad. I enjoyed the scene where Gandalf and Bilbo just sat down and Gandalf was filling up his pipe and preparing his pipe.
The noises in that really made me want to leave our screening.
I quite liked it though.
Scratching.
I was like, because we there hadn't been enough Gandalf in this film. And for all
in some ways, Rob, there was too much. We can talk about that scene in a moment.
For all the epic scale, it is always those, it's a clumsy word to use when you're talking about Middle-earth, but those human moments where it just quietens down a little bit, zooms in on just two people sharing a moment together. And I quite enjoyed that moment.
I did.
After everything had happened, where they're not even talking to each other. Bilbo's just sitting down, Gandalf sitting down next to him, filling up his pipe, as Gandalf does.
A little moment as well. I really liked that the adjudicator who was selling all of his stuff asked what the contract was for, and he was like, and he didn't want to say he was a burglar. If they could have had that all the way through. Should we go back and do the film? Just pick out the key bits. Most of it is a big fight. We should.
I mean, I've listed the bits that I hated, and we've talked about most of those. So good. I've just written that fucking guy. That guy with the eyebrows. Yeah, we've talked about him.
We have.
Don't know if we need to talk to him about him anymore.
Let's not bang on.
But oh my god, the bit where he puts the gold in his bra.
Yeah, and the little joke, and the rope's barred into that. Alfred, your slip is showing.
So weird.
I think again, I feel like the film is having a different time with that character than I am.
I've written Frank Lampard Thorin. because he does the serious smile, serious face all the time at the beginning. Really? When he's talking to Bilbo, and there's like a little bit of the old Thorin comes in. Oh yes, Bilbo, yeah, and then he just.
But someone is betraying me.
Someone is betraying me. Of course, they are my kin, but one of them has the orchestra. I did not enjoy that. Then I've written the Matrix fight with Elrond and Saruman against the Nine. We may as well go through it because this happens. We'll talk about this and then we'll get to Smaug being killed.
Well, because you in the last podcast said I really like the stuff about the Necromancer and Dol Guldur, and I said, did you now? And this is why. I remember this being...
This wasn't anything like that. Gandalf was doing Gandalf things in Dol Guldur. A little bit over the top, maybe. Saruman doesn't need to move like he's fighting a kung fu fight.
And why are the Nine sort of floating around in space?
Strange.
It's odd decision.
Very strange.
But they're all... Oh, Jesus Christ. I almost laughed out loud when Elrond says, you should have stayed dead. They're not fucking dead. The whole point about them is that they're not dead.
I didn't enjoy that scene at all.
You know they're not dead, right? Can we just establish that on this podcast? We admit that the Wraiths are not dead. They have rings which give them extra long life. They have faded.
They're not alive like regular beings are.
No, I think they are.
Much like Sauron, like the spirit is tied to the ring.
But they're mortals in a way different to Sauron. Sauron is always going to fucking respawn somewhere in Valinor or wherever it is.
But then the Wraiths also respawn. There is like a respawn.
They never die. They just fade. And they are tied to the ring, and that's when their presence might...
They're getting washed away down the river's a respawn moment.
Sure.
They respawn back in Barad-dûr and they get given the fell beasts rather than horses.
They're literally physical beings. You can't see them because they faded until you put the ring on, and then you can see them. That's why when
that's where
Eowyn's
sword goes actually into an actual face.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and then the armor crumples around it. But anyway, no matter what we think about whether they respawn or whatever, they are not dead. They have never died. That is, I would say, the defining characteristic of the Wraiths is that they have never died. So Elrond's coming in, and why are they coming in separately? That is like WWE. It's like his fucking music starts playing and he's at the top of the runway.
There'll be the three of them, Galadriel, Saruman and Elrond. They've all arrived at the same time.
Yeah.
Galadriel's like, I'll go in first. And he'll say to me something like, oh, you shouldn't have come here by yourself. And at that point, Elrond, I'll say, I'm not alone. And then you walk in.
Exactly.
And then Saruman, you can come in and be like, do you need any assistance, my lady?
Oh my God, it was so bad. And then what happens if it all goes wrong? Don't worry, I'll turn green. It'll be fine.
Oh, it was really... I didn't enjoy it. Didn't enjoy that fight at all.
I cannot tell you how much I didn't enjoy it. You get the White Council gets it has an actual action scene, a fight scene, and the way that I don't think that Tolkien envisaged that the different that the expression of power of these beings would be like this.
If I ever had a TARDIS or anything, that's what I would do. I would show Tolkien this.
Don't show him this.
Can you imagine if we were able to bring just Tolkien on the podcast?
I've thought about this over the last on the podcast.
Still alive. Like Tolkien, he's almost become like a mythical figure. Sometimes it's easy to forget that Tolkien was an actual human being.
Yeah.
Rather than the creator of this. He's been dead probably, I think, since before we were born.
Yeah, 77 or something.
So there is something quite mythological about him almost.
Yes.
He was just a man. Can you imagine? He's watching this and just sitting here talking on the podcast and having opinions about it.
We can read everything he wrote and then extrapolate what he might feel. I'm not sure that he would have entirely disliked Jackson's films, but also I don't think he was a big film liker. Didn't like Disney at all. But then I think that Disney, to him and to British people of that time, spoke to a simplification and a commercialization. Obviously, who knows what he'd have thought about Lord of the Rings calendars and lunchboxes and figurines and all of that shit. But the films themselves, I think that there is some quality expression of his ideas. but not in this fucking scene. Not in the
No, not in this scene. And Gandalf's just in a bad way. Gandalf can't join in the fight.
And what's happened to, because again, I slightly cloudy during a couple of moments in the last film, there's a big orc who puts him in a cage.
Yeah.
Is that basically just one big orc defeats Gandalf? Was that the vibe?
No,
What?
Sauron puts him in the cage.
So literal Sauron,
Gandalf...
who isn't alive yet, who hasn't taken form yet.
Sauron's not dead. Sauron never died.
No,
either.
he's not mortal.
Endured.
Exactly. So his spirit put him in the cage. Is that what we're saying?
In the previous film, Sauron manifested in such a way as to pin Gandalf up against that wall.
I think this part of Tolkien's writing
And then he put him in the cage.
It's genuinely vague in terms of, there is that letter which I read out about, because I was always like, what, you know, when elves die, they literally respawn. They just respawn.
Yeah, I read this. That seems silly to me. So Haldir,
when they're all sad.
Haldir is there in Helm's Deep getting killed.
Yeah, he's fine.
You're telling me Haldir's respawned somewhere?
Yeah. So
Where?
they're all fine. That's why Thranduil was saying, I will not spell anymore.
So where's Legolas's mother? Where's she respawned?
Was she a human though? No, she wasn't, was she?
No.
So she's just somewhere else.
That is.
So why would you bury her?
I
You wouldn't
know.
bother.
I did not know that about elves until about a week ago. I assumed that they were immortal so long as they didn't suffer sword in face.
Yeah, no,
Or
I think
something
they're
like that.
literally immortal, as in they cannot be killed. So they're
I've seen some dead elves. I saw loads of dead elves in this film,
yeah, that's
just
different.
all lying on the floor,
That's
covered in
different.
blood.
That's in the second order of creation, isn't it? In the physical world, that's different.
So they've died in Middle Earth,
Yeah.
and they respawn.
Well, the confusing
In
thing is, I think that,
Valinor, is that where they respawn?
to be honest, I don't know enough about the specific names. I've just been reading a lot about.
Someone email us.
Because
Someone
I was
tell us.
quite annoyed about Galadriel being so powerful in that scene at Dol Guldur. What, she's way more powerful than the wizards, than the Istari, and
Is she supposed to be?
well, and I think it's open again. What you get in when you look for threads about this is some people saying Tolkien is not interested in power levels. Stop being a baby. And actually, I read one this morning, which was the greatest sin of Tolkien discussers is endlessly going on about power levels. And then another one was talking about how she's the last of the Noldor, which is like an old race of elves, and they weren't evil, but they were in revolt against the creators. And a lot of the Tolkien, I can't believe we're talking about this. A lot of the Tolkien,
It's what he would have wanted.
the grand themes are about the virtue of creation, but also the how exceptional it is to be able to create. So this idea that Morgoth or Melkor, their sin is wanting to create things, but they don't have the grace or they're not supposed to do that.
No.
So the things that they create are horrible. And I think that the elves were annoyed about the passing of time in Middle-earth. So they'd entered Middle-earth, which is, they describe it as an art or a work, the great work of Middle-earth. And then they are trying to resist. That's why they create the rings. They're trying to resist in the first season of Rings of Power. They're trying to stop things from fading, including themselves. So they're in kind of rebellion against the whatever they're called, the big lads, Valar.
The Valar.
And so the idea being that when you are sort of unchecked in that way and you're just using then you're very powerful. So the Istari are working, they're conduits of the Valar. So the idea being that maybe they are more working within the terms of whoever the gods are that we're not saying the right name for probably, they don't want to work, to express themselves too manifestly in the physical world.
Got to read the Silmarillion.
Yeah, right.
You learn all these terms.
And ultimately, I don't think that me knowing all of this stuff makes it better. But on a dramatic level, Gandalf, a very powerful character, being carted off by rabbits while Galadriel goes Super Saiyan is not a good scene. I didn't enjoy that.
I almost enjoy Galadriel going Super Saiyan.
But then she kind of flings them and they just sort of like fly away like ghosts.
Yeah. With Sauron, she's having a little fight with.
That's very silly, isn't it?
Post Rings of Power, I did find it interesting. It's like,
there it is, that story.
there's
I know.
Galadriel and Sauron.
Like when they were on that boat that time.
Remember, they almost fancied each other, and now here they are thousands of years later. fighting each other.
Yeah, it's like when you go
Galadriel kicks ass in the Rings of Power.
She does. I mean, she's very powerful. She is very powerful.
So, yes, there's that bit. At the start of the film, Smaug, he dies very quickly.
He does.
After burning lots of Lake Town and falling on top of Stephen Fry.
Burns all of Lake Town very quickly.
Very reminiscent of what happens right at the end of Game of Thrones, Season 8. Just a dragon laying waste to stuff. And what a shot by Bard.
Yeah, I didn't like that he was using his kid as a little tripod.
Why didn't... I've got to stop asking why. Because it doesn't make any sense.
Why didn't they use the
breathe
dwarf
fire on them from far away, Smaug? Just do that.
Well, you could say the same about Thorin. Why walk slowly over the corpse of your fallen enemy on the ice? Why not simply leave the ice?
And the answer to all of these questions is because it makes for a scene.
Yes.
So Smaug's just, done away with within the first maybe 20 minutes of the film.
And and again, I was trying to think about whether there is a better place to put this. You put this at the end of the last film. I think you have a problem where there's a movie where the thing I wanted to happen, that the quest was set up to achieve, has happened. And it reveals again the problem probably inherent in the book, that dramatically everything that happens afterwards is an anticlimax. And I mean that not in the sort of pejorative offhand way. I mean, the climax has already happened.
Yeah.
Or at least it's post-climax.
It's like if they made the third Lord of the Rings movie, The Scouring of the Shire.
Yes, it is. And I think that probably the fact that The Scouring of the Shire exists tells us something about what Tolkien thought was important in stories and what we think is important in stories, certainly dramatic ones told in cinema. And he did say that these aren't dramatic. He said they're not really dramatic works, they're epic works. And then we had all that, we talked a little bit about the structure of the books just running in parallel, one after the other. So not in parallel, sequentially. And that isn't made for moment-to-moment gripping excitement.
No. It feels very much like Tolkien feels like he is just chronicling some things that happened.
Yeah.
Just passing this knowledge down to all of you. Here's what happened.
And also I think that it probably says something about where we've come as a culture over the last 100 years.
Yeah.
That small details like Bilbo going home or Frodo and the gang going home and then Sam eventually becoming mayor of fucking Pumpkin Town or whatever it was. Those can be very important, but they're not dramatic. And the idea that unless something is told to us with a rousing bit of music and someone putting their hands on their hips and delivering us a big speech or whatever, that it's not important, is actually, that is interesting, isn't it? That's the clashing, because these films seem like they're reaching for that moment all of the time. There were some bits where I felt the music was so loud and was leading me by the nose so hard that it was honestly difficult to hear the things that were being said, especially with Bard.
It's very much following the rules of the blockbuster, character arcs, the stakes. There's always something at stake.
I don't know if it's reductive of me to suggest this, very much with my own sort of little criticism of people who talk about fan edits, and why didn't they do this better or whatever. But I do wonder if with a limited amount of time, you naturally fall back on the formulas and the devices that had worked in your previous cycle of things to try and deliver something at a sort of a minimum level of coherence and quality.
Yes.
But we don't like it.
What is it about Thorin dying and Bilbo being sad over the top of him that is just nowhere near as good as Boromir dying and Aragorn being over the top of him? What is it about Thorin leading the charge of the dwarves that just fails and falls in comparison to King Theoden leading the Rohirrim into battle?
It's funny, isn't it? Because you're right, there's similar arcs and similar moments. And I would say that the thing which is holding Thorin back is much more artificial and inflated artificially in these films in order to give us an obstacle that is then overcome. Maybe it's the performances. I would say that both Sean Bean and, oh my word, I've forgotten his name, which is terrible. But Theoden.
Bernard Hill.
Bernard Hill, who I met. are better than Richard Armitage, at least with what he's given here.
Yes.
Boromir, man, when he's on the ground, that character, the nobility of that character, trying to do his best, failing because all men will fail in face of the ring, admitting to the grace of the king, and then the love of his homeland coming through in the Lords of Gondor have returned. It's so good.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, but
What
Thorin,
hope has he got?
Thorin loves his home as well. And
But he
Boromir,
only speaks like this, Rob, about gold and mountains. He's not as good.
Boromir falls victim to temptation. You know, he's a flawed character. There are a lot of similarities.
I think it's also how it's... I don't want to just land it on the performances. They exist within the scope of the stories that are being told. And I think that the story for Boromir is shaped so much better. I will say that in the fight, I actually really enjoy the fight with Azog.
Azog.
I really enjoy that fight. I really wanted him to fucking win. And I think that the action is really good. The way that he wins is kind of great. It's really smart. It's inventive. Picks up the massive mace. It's like it is cartoonish. It chucks it at him.
That's not the fatality though.
No.
You think it should be.
Sure.
You knew as soon as it zoomed into his face with his eyes closed that he was going to open his eyes.
Ah, 1,000,000%.
And have one last trick up his sleeve. Oh,
but the trick is leaping out of the ice.
That was good.
How the
done,
fuck
Azog.
has he done that?
He's just really powerful, isn't he?
And he's pushed off water?
I tell you what, the bit that I did concede, I just thought was cool, was when Legolas threw the sword to Thorin.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
That was cool.
I thought you were going to say when Legolas was running on the falling bricks.
That was... I literally laughed out loud at that bit.
I did notice that.
Absurd.
It's too far. It was kind of like they'd had 10 years of listening to people say, I'm not sure about the shield or the elephant trunk.
Well, look what he can do here. That's a video game power. That's a slow down time power.
Yeah, it's silly. The sword thing, actually, I did like. And again, I feel like if I'd been more favourably disposed towards the whole movie set, I maybe would be thinking that's really cool. Because it's
cool,
all crisp.
It's got a bit of emotional weight because Legolas takes the sword off him in the previous film.
Which I was annoyed about because obviously Orcrist is just, it's part of that troll horde. They find it and then it's always Thorin's sword.
And that's it. I think that is what separates, and that is what the difference is between why stuff lands and is good in the Lord of the Rings and the stuff that does land here, why it's just got something to it. You're just like, oh yeah, Legolas, there's story being told in that. It's not just a cool thing that's happening. It's in that moment, Legolas is accepting Thorin as being worthy of this blade. And he's like, okay, have it. And there's just a little Legolas is just doing. He's growing there. There are some growth for Legolas.
Right, there are seeds of the ability to form friendships with dwarves that we know will come later. I did like that. I laughed out loud actually just before that, where he's like, "Oh, I've got to save." They were all saying Tariel actually, and we've been saying Toriel, but I mean she's made up, so I guess it doesn't really matter. Like David Bowie, and he's on top of that tower, and he runs out of arrows, and he realizes he's got to get across. And the big nasty orc is already raised, so he's only got a second or two.
Oh, he does a God of War thing.
He does the full Ratatouille that we talked about before.
The full Ratatouille,
where he jumps on the troll.
It's God of War. It is. Kratos literally does that in God of War. Controls big troll.
See, now I want to know whether that happens before Ratatouille, which is 2004, I think, or after. Who's stealing from who?
God of War. First God of War was 2005. I want to say.
Oh.
So Ratatouille was doing it first.
It was something in the culture.
Then Kratos did it.
Yeah.
But Legolas is full-on Kratos.
Well, I was telling you, because we were talking about Shadow of War. It happens in that with the Balrog, and I was saying how awful it is. I'd forgotten it happens in this film.
How did Legolas know that was going to be the outcome? Exactly. I've got to get there. I'm going to do this to this troll.
I know. Yeah.
And it's going to work. I'm just going to trust it's going to work.
Well, it made me realise that there is like a grammar to the series sometimes when Legolas is in those situations where he sees something, like when he's like, oh, I've got to get up to there. I'll just hitch a ride on this bat.
He's held down L1 for sure, and the bat has glowed red. He's used his elven senses and pressed triangle on the bat, and it's initiated a little cutscene, and then he's found himself where he needs to go.
It's like when he does that okay, I've run out of the thing I thought and I need to do something, it's like that the environment is going to offer him something. So he does a little look around and it's like, all right, there's a tower, there's a troll. Let's go.
I enjoyed almost all of the action with Legolas, though, apart from the slow-mo stair climb.
Fair.
Which was just silly.
It's too much.
There's lots I liked. I really liked when Thranduil and his elk strung up 4 orcs and he cut all their heads off at once.
I think that
Very
is the
good.
kind of thing I can see being reported in The Hobbit. It's on that level and they cut off all their heads. Yay! That's fine.
Also, there's just a little bit of that ingenuity and creativity that we saw in Brain Dead.
Yeah.
With all those zombie deaths. Just fun ways for orcs to die.
Definitely.
That was a fun way for some orcs to die.
I'm a massive fan of dwarfs in fantasy storytelling, literature. As I mentioned, I played a dwarf in World of Warcraft. So the first time I saw this, and then I'd forgotten it, and then I loved it this time as well, is when the Dane's dwarves make a shield wall against the orcs.
Yep.
And they're so CG. It's a kind of a shame. They're all, I don't know if it was to save fucking RAM or whatever, but like they all look exactly the same. They've got the same armor as well. So they're like a FIFA crowd in a way, but I still love this moment, which is when they double layer their shields. And when we're talking about like strategically, it doesn't make any sense, but dramatically it does. It's like, all right, we've got this incredibly strong shield wall and it's being manned by the dwarves who are basically made of rock. Nothing can get through this. And the elves just fucking jump over the top.
That was good.
It was good, but it's also tactically brain dead.
But again, I enjoyed that moment as well. Because again, there's just a little bit of story in it.
Yes.
It's Thranduil, I'm not helping the dwarves. And Gandalf basically says, the last we see of the elves is Gandalf saying to Thranduil, Thranduil, this is madness. You have to help.
I wish there was a better reason.
And
about
yeah, but it's something, isn't it? It's not great. They've just had a little argument about the gold. But there's just something. It's not just a cool moment, all elves jumping over the dwarf shields. There's just a little bit of story in it as well. Nothing on the level of what we were getting in the Lord of the Rings, but something. There's something there.
Everything that comes from that is an echo of and needs to be as elegant as I never thought I would die side by side with an elf.
Yeah, there's nothing of that level, unfortunately. Here.
I could do that.
How about side by side with a friend? Oh, Lord of the Rings, my God. So good. What have I written down here? Basically, Smaug is killed.
Yeah.
I've written Thorin goes Super Saiyan twat.
Yeah.
Which is like he goes full bad. We've
Yes,
talked
he
about
does.
that.
Very silly.
And then I've just written it's just the Battle of the Five Armies. So we've talked about Legolas and Tauriel. Bard has his strange little moment where he saves his family by going down the hill in a little cart.
Oh, I really didn't enjoy that.
No.
That's it. That's all we need to say about that. Do you know the fighting in Dale through the streets? I quite liked there's that kind of the captain from Lake Town, the older guy who's helping Bard.
Yeah.
He's quite cool. I like him and his guys. I like how ragtag they are next to the elves. The elves again look like they're not just incredibly in sync, but they've been like select duplicate on like After Effects. Like we'll just make loads of them.
Yeah. It is quite ridiculous.
They're a bit too formulaic. But in general, at this stage in the book again, Bard is basically just leading the men of Lake Town. So all of this extrapolation, I enjoyed. Obviously, I didn't enjoy Alfred. One of the things I guess they decided to do with Bard was to make him a family man, which I actually quite like the scene with his son. That was quite good. It wasn't...
When he brings him the arrow, you mean?
No, when he saves his sisters and he kills one orc because he takes it by surprise.
Yeah.
And then he's just going to get killed. And he's a bit lucky, but he has the wherewithal. It's like just pitched right. He's not suddenly going to become a hero, but he's brave and he gets... Some of the orcs in these films are terrible fighters, but that's fine. And I guess I'm interested in... I'm really on the fence. I actually think all the performances of Bard's family, for younger performers as well, can sometimes stick out. I thought they were pretty strong.
Yeah, I would agree.
But I'm not sure that it really does much for me anyway. And maybe what we'd be left with if there wasn't. I mean, it's obviously a very conscious choice to bring another element to that character. And I guess maybe what we'd be left with otherwise would be just another movie about a group of heroic men who are great. One's great with a sword, one's great with a bow. So maybe it is better than that. But it didn't really do loads for me. It seems to be like a constant thing where he can turn around in the middle of a battle and there's someone he needs to immediately go and save.
There was a lot of that. I mean, the whole... this film was what, 2 hours and 20 minutes long.
Yeah, 2 hours 10 actually. I thought it was pretty sensible.
The whole last hour of it is essentially just different emotional stakes, different little pockets of peril within this grander battle.
Yeah.
The stakes for which ultimately are, like you say, just for strategic positioning. So it's not like Sauron is trying to destroy the world of men here. He just wants the mountain.
Yes.
He just wants the mountain so he can take his armies through Angmar and from Gundabad or...
Yeah.
It's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. You think of the scale and how epic this fight is. This is happening 60 years before the events of The Lord of the Rings. So it's almost like when Legolas gets to the Pelennor Fields, he must be like, oh, this is easy.
Yeah.
You should see what I was doing 60 years ago.
I guess he's 3,000 years. I was probably seeing quite a few battles.
Yeah.
I agree, Robert. I agree.
Yeah.
Can I say some things I liked?
Let's definitely say some things that you like.
Already said quite a few of them. Moments which I think in a different environment would have had a real chance of just seeming rousing and cool. When Thorin takes his best warriors to go and fight the key orcs.
Azog,
That's cool. Keely, Feely and Dwalin, I think it is.
Graham McTavish, yeah.
And they're slicing stuff up. And there was a little bit of me when they said goblin mercenaries, because one of the armies is, they're not really supposed to be orcs. They're supposed to be the goblins who have followed them from the mountains because they're mad about the Goblin King being killed, I think. But when they're like, there's only 100 of them, we'll take care of it. It's like there was 13 of you and you were tied up in a mountain, and now suddenly two of you can take on 100. That seems insane.
I think they get probably stat boost from home advantage. They're in Erebor, right? So they've got plus 20 or something.
I guess they found all the legendary gear in the mountain as well.
Yeah,
maybe that's what it is.
And they've leveled up a bunch since the Goblin Mountain as well.
And they've got the debuff from the Goblin King having been killed.
Yeah.
But I love that scene where Gandalf says he's taken his best warriors. And again, it's it's basic stuff, but isn't it? But then it's like them all chopping up. Just seeing the dwarves let loose a bit. And like I said, the shield wall, because we mentioned before, there aren't really very many dwarves in Lord of the Rings, the trilogy. They're just...
most of them are dead.
They're elsewhere or dead. It's a bit sad, isn't it? Because they take back this mountain. It's like, if this mountain is so fucking important, how come we don't see it in Lord of the Rings?
And why, having taken this back, did they feel the need to go and take Moria back?
Well, I think maybe it's all part of that same, that went fine. So I'm going to go and what could possibly go wrong?
Let's do Moria now.
Yeah, looking for group. So I did enjoy that. What else did I enjoy? Some other things. I'm sure. I enjoyed the dragon is brilliant. Just stomping over houses, coming towards Bard, talking about eating his children.
Yeah.
That was great, man.
You're going to burn.
One of the things because I got to the end of the book, one of the things which is different, but again, I don't mind. This is a really classic dragon. Just looks like, I mentioned last week, it looks a bit like the one that Tolkien drew himself. In the book, he has deliberately made himself an armor of gold and incredibly precious, tough jewels on his underbelly. Mm-hmm. So his whole underbelly is like encrusted. It looks like awful, I don't even know, like a body decoration. And they don't try that at all in the design of this dragon, which I think is probably fine.
Maybe they alluded to it a little bit when he flew up with the molten gold on him in the previous film.
Well, there was that scene of him creeping over them and a few gold coins fall down, which I did enjoy.
I saw a drawing of Smaug next to, I think it's Alcagon the Black.
Okay.
The biggest dragon in Middle-earth history.
All right.
Morgoth's dragon. And I would love for there to be a film at one point with Alcagon the Black, or whatever he's called in it.
How much smaller?
Smaug is like a little fly on the back of a humpback whale.
Right.
It's like ridiculous. If Alcagon the Black is as big as he is in this picture, he would be the size of Lake Town easily.
Wow.
Like he would just, 1 foot would stomp on Lake Town. That's how ridiculously big he is. And you do wonder what that dragon would have to eat to actually survive every day if it was living in Middle-earth. Because it would put its arm up, it would rest its elbow on a mountain and rest its elbow on another mountain, and its tail would be in Mirkwood. That's
Well, it's like those rock giants.
Silly.
What are they eating?
I don't know. Maybe they don't eat.
Maybe their dragon doesn't eat.
No.
Maybe he just has bad thoughts and that sustains him.
What was Smaug eating for how many years he was just there sleeping in his pile of gold?
I don't know, maybe he was hibernating. But
Yeah.
I think he would fly out and eat sheep. That would be my guess. There's a whole bit of business in the book with ravens, which is again alluded to. But the ravens there are maybe ravens still there, and then there's like a bit of translation. It's like because it's the thrush which is eating the snail, and then the ravens come back, or they call in some ravens, and the raven has to translate, and the thrush is like, I can't even remember what the message is, but it's really important. And then at some point, one of them goes and gets the eagles, and that's why the eagles turn up in the end.
Oh, the eagles. That was a bit I didn't enjoy.
The eagles arriving.
Bilbo's sort of like half-hearted. It almost felt ad-libbed by Martin Freeman as Thorin was dying, and he was like, "Thorin, the eagles are coming, Thorin. The eagles are here." So is that supposed to be comforting to Thorin? Thorin's dead.
I am basically not a fan of the Freeman interpretation of Bilbo.
No.
Like when it comes down to it, there's too much stuttering. There's too much a mode of acting where it's like the performance is saying, "I can't believe I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it," and it's so noughties to me, and it seems so dated and not genuine, and I don't like it.
It's a big Freeman performance.
It's
very Martin Freeman.
Maybe, I feel like we're not being fair, but I can't help how
He's a much better actor than I am.
Oh yeah.
He's very good at
agree.
acting, and he's there. And the way he says "tea is at 4," I sort of forgave him for everything he did.
I guess maybe again, like the films themselves, that's why I'm frustrated. Is the tipping over into what I would consider the tics and the normal repertoire doesn't do justice to how good he is.
No. I don't know if there's anything else to talk about in terms of the film. Unless we can go on.
One thing, which is
One
I
last
enjoyed Bilbo throwing stones because he does it in the spiders in the book. And the first time I saw this film, I was like, "Oh, Bilbo! Suddenly Bilbo's got a fucking cannon arm and he's killing orcs with one stone." But
in the prologue to the Lord of the Rings, the book concerning hobbits,
talks about how they love baseball.
Tolkien makes explicit reference to how good hobbits are at aiming and throwing stuff.
Yeah,
They're really good at throwing.
that must be.
And so it is faithful to the books. And we get Merry and Pippin doing it in Fellowship of the Ring. They're taking down Uruk-hai with some of their stones.
That's true. And like I said, it is obviously the first thing he wrote was that he kills a bunch of the spiders. So it's fair. And it's just in this one rather than the previous. So there we go. Another thing I liked. I said I was going to talk about things I liked, and there were 2.
I think there were more things I liked in this film than I expected. Overall, definitely my least favourite of the 3 Hobbit films. But overall, as a trilogy, I did not hate this anywhere near. In fact, I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all.
No, I don't hate it at all. And I the thing which is, I mean, it might not have sounded like it to people who are listening, but the thing that I wanted to happen has happened, which is I've come out enjoying these films more. Maybe just because we vented for 3 hours about them.
Yeah. And maybe I will watch them again one day. One day.
Maybe your daughter would like to watch them.
I'm not sure she would.
Okay.
I'm not sure she would.
That's fine.
I'm still struggling to get through the book with her. Like it has to be, it's like should we read The Hobbit today? And
just one
most
page.
of the time it's like, I don't know. She really likes riddles. And so I made her excited about it because of the Riddles in the Dark chapter. And that happens quite soon.
Yeah.
So now she's just like, oh,
what happens next? Why are the elves being so mean? What's going on?
Spiders. Oh, don't care.
Are we doing mailbag?
We can do some mailbag. I have not prepared any mailbag. Have you got any mailbag for us?
A little bit of mailbag. And it's the last time to do it, really, because these are... we asked people for some defences of the Hobbit movies and a little bit of Hobbit positivity. So that's what we've got.
Hobbitivity.
Elaine Bassier writes, I'm a long-time fan of PlayStation Access. Watching your videos is basically how I got into gaming. I was so happy to discover your podcast and love getting to hear more from you all, especially as Nathan stepped away from being a host on Access a few years back. See, Rob, that's all anyone talks about. I, along with more fans, I'm sure, think that the Lord of the Rings films are far superior to the Hobbit movies. However, my family includes all 6 films whenever the time comes for a rewatch, and I will admit to being fond of the Hobbit trilogy. We do watch them first, though, so we can save the best for last and end on a high note. As an example of something I enjoy in Desolation of Smaug, I'll bring up the river barrel fight. I know it's heavily criticised, and I anticipate hearing that you don't like it either, but I've always thought it was a load of big, stupid fun. I remember saying to myself that this movie was the most fun I'd had in a theatre that year when I first saw it, and it came out at the end of the year, to be fair. And I still think all 3 of them are entertaining. Also, when the movie ended on a cliffhanger with Smaug flying toward Lake Town, a woman in my theatre screamed, "What the fuck?" at the screen, which my family always brings up and laughs about when we're watching it again. Another reason I cut the Hobbit movies some slack is because I'm a huge fan of fantasy stories, but there aren't that many movies that scratch that itch for me. I'd argue that the Hobbit films are better quality, certainly in terms of production, but yes, even in their story and writing, than most of the rest of that genre, at least when it comes to visual media. Having said that, do you have any other fantasy movies that you'd recommend? Perhaps some that you feel are underrated. I'd love to check them out. One I adore is Stardust, which is similar to another favourite of mine, The Princess Bride. Some nice things about Dave from a fan across the pond, which is why I did that brilliant accent. Elaine, fantasy movie, Rob? When we did some quite recently.
We did.
In the fancy phase, but that's a bonus episode.
I don't know if I've seen too many fantasy films. A lot of them are bad as well, aren't they?
They are quite bad. Aragon and all of that. Do you know the recent D&D movie was pretty good?
I've not seen that.
I actually had a good time. That was fun.
I'm not actually a very well watched movie person. I don't watch a lot of movies. I used to really like. I think we talked about The Black Cauldron. That's a Disney animated fantasy film. I really like The Black Cauldron. I've not seen Aragon. I've not seen Stardust. I'm trying to think.
No,
I can't think off the top of my head right now. I'd have to go and have a bigger think and come back maybe in another episode with
maybe it's something
some more recommendations
for a bigger discussion, but it does feel like films are much better at sci-fi than they are at fantasy.
For sure. I think the Narnia films are generally pretty poor.
They're just fine. They're like the early Harry Potters for me. They're fine.
I have a soft spot for the Harry Potter movies. The first 2, I had a brilliant time watching them in the cinema. I was really young. And they were just there's something quite magical about it. I think they captured the spirit of those early books quite well.
I remember thinking they were very CBBC.
I'm not sure. I think Prisoner of Azkaban is genuinely a brilliant film.
Yeah, I remember watching that and it being like someone had thrown cold water over me. I was like, how is this a Harry Potter film?
It's brilliant.
This is amazing.
Fantastic. The last few, I don't have much time for. I think they're quite bleak and
I think 3 to 6 are great. And then
4 I think it's okay.
They're just so Christmassy to me as well. Like
yes, they're very
They're
Christmassy.
always on at Christmas. There's something about, like, as they get bleaker, the team all kind of hiding away, whether it's in the common room or at that weird house that they've got that place. There's that one which film is it where Harry gets on a bus at the beginning? And I remember reading that book for the first time and there's like
That's
maybe
Prisoner of Azkaban. The night bus.
Really? Is that early on? There's like a kid on there who's like the conductor?
Yeah.
I thought that was 4 or 5.
No, that's number 3 because he inflates his Aunt Marge, played by oh my god, I've forgotten Pam Ferris,
right?
Who also plays Trunchbull in Matilda.
Yeah, she's in Darling Bones something as well.
So that's a brilliant scene, and then he runs away from home and he goes on the night bus. And that was for me where that film was like, okay, this is very different tonally to the first 2 Harry Potter films.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Doing lots of weird weird stuff.
And it just looks much better as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are some films. We should think more about that.
We should.
And we will.
What other fantasy films do you like? Oh, Harry Potter, Narnia. We've got to be able to think of something.
We got some experts over here. Here is another email, which it came through when we were watching the film last night, from Scott Poon, which is an extraordinary name. Scott Poon. Hello, gang. I've been a relatively long-time Axis fan, and it brought me so much joy to see the three of you branch out and try a platform that allows us fans to get your unfiltered opinions about topics you love. Admittedly, hearing F-bombs from you all still shocks me each time. Fuck you, Scott.
Oh my God, I was about to say that, and I thought maybe I shouldn't say
No, we shouldn't swear directly at the audience. I really enjoyed your in-depth, albeit brief discussions on the M4 Hobbit, the fan edit. Nate's points were so on point. Thanks very much, Scott. I think it's easy for fans, including myself, to look at the final cuts of movies, especially trilogies, and slice and dice things to make a better, in inverted commas, story. I'm guilty of this. I think about how the new Star Wars trilogy could be recut or reorganised to make more sense, probably once every 2 weeks. This is a bit of a longer rant, so too long didn't read is that fan edits often use the hard work of others rather than create anything fully new, shuffle it around and claim it's better without the pressures and context of what it's like to actually create a film. And then he really does just say that at some length. So I did appreciate the point, and I think that it's correct. Keep up the exceptional work in this podcast. I just became a Patreon member, and I'm proud to say it's the first ever Patreon I've signed up for. All the best, Ensign Scott. Thank you to Scott for that. And
Thank you, Ensign Scott.
And for supporting us as well. I enjoy the newsletter next week, which Rob is definitely going to write.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God. If you go to Commander, Ensign Scott, you get 2 bonus episodes.
Well, and there's 9 bonus episodes waiting for you just to be listened to. Immediately, 9 hours of fun with people who swear at you on podcasts. Yeah. We should charge, that should be an extra tier, just swearing at people.
If you $10 a month, and we will say, fuck you, and then your name at the end of every episode.
Exactly. We did have some other mailbag, mostly echoing the same points. Basically, people knowing that these aren't as good, but feeling warmly towards them anyway.
Yeah. I mean, we end our Middle-earth journey.
Now it comes to it.
We're at the I'm quite ready for another adventure. We didn't talk about that. I really loved the very end.
When
you saw Ian Holm. And I think I saw something on YouTube maybe a year or so ago that I found quite upsetting and moving. I think it was just after Ian Holm had died. Ian Holm was not particularly well when filming these scenes. I think you can kind of tell. Like he wasn't really able to memorize a lot of his lines.
Wow.
So I think they made the creative decision in the end to basically just have him. He looks at the ring and he says, he just looks up as he hears the door going and he says, "No, thank you." And then they bring in the actual audio. And I did feel myself getting a little bit emotional there, where the map, you see the map and you just hear, you're like, oh my God, I'm hearing the scene when Gandalf.
I really liked it. And again, it made me think, if these films had been brilliant at that moment, I'd have been transported.
Yes.
I'd have been like, you've linked it up so beautifully. I mention it only because we talked specifically about Ian Holm and about Romulus, and that there was that thing. If any of you follow us on Twitter or X, we had some little interactions. Quite a few people sent us that on Blu-ray.
Mm-hmm.
They have redone those scenes, and they've tried to use. We talked at the time. Fede Alvarez, the director of Alien Romulus, wasn't completely happy with the scenes featuring Ian Holm's likeness. They had a marionette made, and they hadn't used it like a physical prop, and they hadn't used it as much. And I think that they've dialed back some of the CG or reworked it. I don't think it looks that different, to be fair. But I asked you about it because someone had asked us, well, what does Rob think? And you said, I think you just said, leave Ian Holm the fuck alone. It was your text. And I almost tweeted it. But just on that point, though, when you're talking about Ian Holm is alive at this point, so it's not the same. But when you're talking about re-entering a kind of a fictional space that you've been in before, this I thought was. I didn't love the very beginning of the first Hobbit film.
No, I didn't.
But I felt like this was different, a lighter touch, not recreating the same moment. We had that weird chat about the Martin Freeman versus Ian Holm finding the ring scenes, and some people are a bit annoyed that it's not the same audio or the same angle or whatever. And this is slightly different, and I really, really appreciated it. I thought it was just the elegance of seeing it I mean, it's so simple, seeing it from the inside instead of the outside. It's the same moment, and now I'm getting to see this. And you don't show too much. You only see the back of him. I don't have to think about, he looks different, he looks older, blah, 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 blah. It was just great. And that's how all of these things should be handled with grace.
I agree. A lovely note to end on. So as we depart from the harbour and sail off into the Grey Havens, having watched all 6 of Peter Jackson's Middle-earth films.
Yeah.
I think I will sail away with a fresh sort of appreciation and a soft fondness for the Hobbit trilogy. Not something that I've had, it's been I've watched 1.5 of these movies, and that's been my truth for about 10 years now, and now I've seen them.
That's true.
And they're not that bad.
They're not, and there's bits about them I really like.
Yeah.
Dave's going to be like an elf. He's going to respawn back in the Undying Lands, and he'll be back next time we do an episode.
Yes. Well, I believe if you are a commander level on our Patreon, we will have a bonus episode for you to enjoy next or later this week.
Yes. Some more Tolkien business there, because Dave won't be back yet. So we're just going to bang on about Tolkien a bit more.
The newsletter will arrive at some point. I will think of something to write.
Goodo.
And please do continue to send us your emails. Our email address is redshirtcinemaclub@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media. We are on X, we are on Blue Sky, so send us a message there. You can comment on YouTube as well. We have a YouTube channel, so go and find these very same podcast episodes that you're listening to. Maybe you are listening on YouTube right now, in which case, hello.
It's getting bigger than we thought. It's slightly alarming.
So thank you for all of your continued support and messages. We will see you once again in the next episode. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Red Shirt Cinema Club. If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Just check the link in the description. We'd also love to hear from you. Email us at redshirtcinemaclub@gmail.com or follow us on social media. We'll be back with another episode next Monday. See you then.